Hello, Griffins. This is your CyberPatriot coach with another cyber briefing. Today's challenge gives us an opportunity to look at Windows file permissions and also a concept called ownership, which applies to folders and files in Windows. So let's get right to the challenge and see what we can learn. We'll start with our image desktop, and as usual, let's begin with our forensics questions. Scrolling down to the question itself, we see, after questioning, Calamity Jane has denied storing hacking files in her documents directory. Which user actually created the executable file in the directory C:users cjane documents hacking tools? And it says we're looking for the username and not their full name. So this is a continuation of an exercise that we undertook last time, where we found that there were some files that were stored very suspiciously inside this hacking tools folder. It turns out after talking to Calamity Jane that maybe she's not the one who put them there after all. So it's our job to find out who the real culprit is. Let's see how we do that. Again, we're going to start with Windows Explorer. And in Windows Explorer, we know that we are going to, let's move this window down so we can see the path, and move this window up. We are going to see users cjane documents. So let's go to our C drive, the users folder, cjane, and already we run into one of the issues that we have, which is that we don't have permissions into this particular folder. Now, since we're logged in as a user who's administrator on the system, Windows offers to help us out by letting us use our administrator credentials to grant ourselves right to the folders. This is one of the reasons why you want to carefully control who has administrator rights on a Windows system. We're going to go ahead and let Windows assign us those permissions. We click Continue, and now we can see that we're in the cjane folder. From here, we need to go to Documents. But before we drill in, let's right-click on Documents, choose Properties, go to Security, and here we get a list of everyone who has access. And here we can see our Pilot 1 account, which is the one that we're using, has full access into this system. We'll click OK for now. Go down into Documents, and now we have the Hacking Tools folder. From here, we remember that lettertomom.txt.exe is the actual executable file that we found in this folder. Let's right-click on it and choose Properties. From here, we'll select Security. Here are the lists of users, and we can click on each particular one of them to see what rights they have. Now, Calamity Jane is the one who owns this file, so we would expect, these files being in her user drive, that she would have full control. Also, we're in as an administrator, and we just gave ourselves rights to these folders. And the administrators themselves have rights to the folders. But Sneaky Pete doesn't really belong here, so that's kind of suspicious. Let's go one step further. We're going to use this Advanced button to see more information about ownership and rights. And here at the top, we have the full file name, so this is the file that we're looking for, and we see the owner is not Calamity Jane like it should be, but instead is Sneaky Pete. Let's grab this username, and we'll use just the Sneaky Pete part. Now, how do I know just to use the Sneaky Pete part? When I click down here and I see the example in the forensics list, it says just I am user. There's no machine name ahead of it, so we'll just use Sneaky Pete. Let's grab Sneaky Pete, copy that, and again, copying and pasting allows us to be able to make sure that we don't have any typos as we're providing our answer. Press Ctrl V to paste, and we're going to save our work. Now we know that Sneaky Pete has taken ownership of this file, and therefore he is probably the one who created it. Oh, looks like we got it right. It was Sneaky Pete. But I want to point out that this is not an absolute. You can't always depend on the file owner to be the person who created it. But in most cases, it's a pretty good clue to start with. You'll see here that there is the option to change ownership. And it could be that somebody had changed the ownership behind the scenes. But it would have to be an administrator on the system. In this case, since only the Pilot 1 user, that's us, Calamity Jane, and Sneaky Pete have full control to this, it would have to be one of those who changed ownership there. In this case, the evidence is looking pretty strong that Sneaky Pete has done something to be able to create this file. We're going to go ahead and cancel out of this. There are the capabilities to do some advanced permissions, but we don't need those today. We'll hit cancel. We're done with our properties here, so we'll hit cancel one more time. And then we'll come back to Windows Explorer. And you'll be able to see that in each particular folder as we go up, we could also be looking at Properties, Security, Advanced, and telling who the owner is. In this case, it looks like Sneaky Pete has done a lot of damage in this. One interesting thing about permissions is that they are what's called inherited, which means that they generally flow down. We're going to start at the documents level, properties, security. Here again, we see Sneaky Pete has given himself rights. And we're going to fix this problem once and for all. We're going to go into edit. We're going to click on Sneaky Pete, and we're going to remove him from any properties. Up. It says we can't remove him because he's still inheriting permissions one level up. That means we have to cancel out of this and go all the way up to the Calamity Jane folder itself. Properties, Security, Edit, Sneaky Pete, Remove. Now I click Apply, and it's going to give me some errors because we're no longer allowing Sneaky Pete to have access into those all other folders. We can click Continue through all of these errors. When I go back to Calamity Jane, and I go to Documents, Hacking Tools, I can see from the properties of this folder that Sneaky Pete no longer has permissions. And he's still the owner, so that's a problem. Let's go all the way back up to the top where we were, which is Calamity Jane, and let's make her the owner of her folder, as she should be. So from Calamity Jane, we went to Properties, Security, Advanced. And yes, I know these are the windows that I just closed out, but I wanted to start over and show you again how to get here. From here, the owner says System. Let's change that. To change the owner, we're going to select Advanced from the Select User or Group. And we're going to use a little trick built into this that keeps us from having to remember the usernames that we need, which is to click Find Now, and then scroll through until we find Calamity Jane. Now we click OK, and OK again. And I want to replace ownership on every other subcontainer and object. This is going to restore Calamity Jane to having full control of her directory and get out any place where Sneaky Pete might have had access previously. So now I click OK. And it's going to give me some errors here as it applies through. That's okay, because it's assigning permissions, and so it's not unusual that I'm changing permissions on folders that I've already revoked permissions from. When I go back into Calamity Jane, Documents, Hacking Tools, and I right-click on Hack the Planet, Properties, Security, and Advanced, we can see that Calamity Jane is now the owner of this file. So now you can see that file ownership is an important concept that helps to be able to drive who you can give permissions to. And file ownership is also inherited and can be brought down from a higher level folder into the folders and files underneath it. Let's review what we've learned in this exercise. File and folder permissions control who can create, change, and delete files. The permissions include full control, modify, which is the ability to change properties and delete files, read and execute, write. Permissions are also inherited. That is, they flow down to lower level folders and files. And I say this usually because there are some cases where you can block that from happening, but that's a more advanced topic. Owners are assigned when the file or folder is created. Owners can change file and folder permissions. And even though administrators aren't owners and don't have permissions by default, they can assign permissions to themselves or take ownership. So why do we care? Well, permissions are the main way that multiple users on a system keep their files private. And knowing how to audit permissions can help us to be able to find bad actors in Windows systems. I hope that you've enjoyed this briefing, and I hope that this helps you as you compete in CyberPatriot. Happy cyber defending.